offered in partnership with a variety of members at large, the Leadership and Nominating Committee, the Racial Justice Steering Committee, and the Board of Directors. We're going to start today's program with a chalice reading. Where is she? By Vicki. By Vicki Maldonado. So.
Hello. All right, so our chalice lighting today is titled, In Our Time Together. As we gather here together, may we be attentive one to another. May we listen carefully, may we freely speak. May we be respectful of one another. May we be serious, yet not somber. May we be light of heart and full of good cheer. As we gather here together, may we work towards common goals. May we be mindful of our religious community and aware of our responsibilities. May we look into one another's eyes and see ourselves reflected. As we gather here together, may we be attentive one to another and to the task at hand.
We're now going to hear a few remarks from Reverend David.
You guys heard a few remarks from me earlier today. Hi, everyone. Hi. Good morning again. I have some hot cocoa in me, so I'm good. It took me 20 minutes to get through the kids to get to the machine. I wanted to, for anyone who's been in my class, UU 101, you've heard me read this, but I want to read it again, and for obvious reasons. This is from, it's based about the Cambridge Platform, one of our founding documents. It says, to join a church is to enter into a covenant to walk with other members in the spirit of neighborly love. The goal of everything gathered members do is the edification or mutual learning and teaching concerning the many and complex ways of love. Members of a congregation and their elected officers are a complete church. They need no higher authorities in church affairs. Reasoning together in the spirit of love, they can discern whither love leads, it says. And by their lights, the Bible is mainly about the free and covenanted social practice of love. Its ancient stories set them on the road to a revolutionary type of religious community and politics. Refusing to embrace any creed, our members entered simply and beautifully phrased covenants to walk together in the divine spirit of love as best as they could see to do. Their church practice in time led to today's Unitarian, Universalist religious communities in which individuals may differ in a variety of ways and yet continue to walk together freely in the spirit of love. So these discussions on matters of interest, importance, and meaning for our congregation and for the Unitarian Universalist Association are, I don't know if you've ever met Unitarian Universalists, but there seem to be a wide variety of opinions about things in our congregations. And one of the earmarks of what I believe is the most important thing for us is the healthiness of our congregations. How healthy are our congregations? And by health, what I mean is, how are we direct? How do we communicate directly? How are we communicating above the table and not gossiping? How are we doing that in the spirit of love as we journey to update the language, journey together in the spirit of love? To me, these are what makes a congregation a healthy congregation. So as we engage in these difficult conversations, what I hope we don't do is engage in gossip or conjecture or assumptions or projections, which are all things that happen when you get emotional, or you can be upset about something or have a high degree of passion. What I'm hoping we do is we talk about the merits of the things that are being discussed in ways that we can have a healthy conversation where we recognize that we all have differences of opinion, and that's why we're here, to talk about them and to walk together in the spirit of love. Above all else, to journey together in the spirit of love. So I hope that we can do that. I trust that we can do that. I look around this room, and I think that people in this room do that really well. We are one of the healthiest congregations that I've ever known, and I hope that we continue to do that. So that's all I have. Thank you so much.
So thank you, Reverend David. And thanks to all of you. We've got a good turnout. I'm happy to see that. Thank you for joining us today to take part in this important conversation about the final proposed revisions to Article 2 of the UUA Bylaws. Article 2 is where you can find the current 7 principles and 6 sources of our faith, which are under review for updating. I'm hoping most of you are at least a little familiar with the proposed changes to Article 2. As you walked in, we provided a handout from the UUA on the final proposed revisions to Article 2 for your reference, and also a side-by-side comparison of the current and proposed Article 2 changes, which was drafted by Steve Myles. He moved a couple of sections around just to make it easier for comparison purposes, but everything is in there. And the purpose of today's panel discussion is to provide an opportunity for all of us to listen and to learn from each other as encouraged by both in our principles and the pending values. It's important to hear both sides of the issue and get out of our respective bubbles. We are not here to debate the relative merits of the proposed changes, but rather to engage in a conversation about our different perspectives on what the proposed revisions mean to each of us. It's important to examine our beliefs and to ask ourselves about what the faith calls us to do, and if the revisions will help us achieve that. There are differing perspectives on the proposed Article 2 revisions, and it's important to hear those differing perspectives to help each of us determine our individual positions on the proposals. Our current 4th principle states, "We covenant to affirm and promote a free and responsible search for truth and meaning." In the proposed revision, under the new pluralism values, it states, "We covenant to learn from one another in our free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We embrace our differences and commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect." The UUA proposal is to move from principles and sources to values and inspirations. The intent is that the new values will lead us into the second quarter of the 21st century while honoring the historic roots of our liberal progressive faith. In creating the draft of the proposed revisions, thousands of people were involved. It was a very inclusive process, and the electronic process for the amendments made it even more inclusive. Over the course of its work, the Commission engaged in 45 feedback sessions with 4,611 participants. Their videos reached 7,765 viewers, and their 29 surveys generated a total of 10,925 responses. All of that was taken into consideration as they were drafting the new proposals. Here at UUCF last year, we offered several opportunities to engage the congregation in discussions about the proposed changes. Reverend David preached a sermon on it, and that was followed by several congregational discussion sessions, including one that we did by Zoom for those who couldn't make it here in person, We also offered a Wellspring course on Article 2, and we've posted information on our website, which we're currently updating. And today's discussion is a continuation of our efforts to help people understand the role of Article 2 in defining what it means to be a UU. One UUA member that I was talking to explained to me that the Article 2 Study Commission has no problem with congregations and individuals continuing to use the 7 principles and the sources, since there is no erasure of our history, just continued growth and putting it in a different place. The final version, as amended by the 23 General Assembly, received a simple majority vote to move forward. The study commission then had 6 months, to incorporate and clean up any amendments passed by the delegates. And then in November 23, the commission presented its final revision to the UUA Board of Trustees, which incorporated those amendments to be placed on the General Assembly 2024 agenda for final vote. Additional amendments were requested to be submitted to the Board of Trustees not later than February 1st, 2024. So that was at the beginning of this month. A 3/4 vote in favor, thank you, of an amendment was required for them to be considered for inclusion in the proposed revisions. And the final vote on the proposed revision is this coming June. Final approval requires a 2/3 vote of the General Assembly to be adopted as the new Article 2 of the UUA bylaws. If the vote fails in GA 2024, the process ends, and a similar proposal cannot be considered for 2 years. We are living in a difficult, challenging time that can be disturbing. The prospect of change is in something like our principles and purposes, which for many of us are deeply meaningful, can be an additional stressor. It's hard to let go of something that you have cherished and relied on for your daily guidance to move to something new and unfamiliar. Change is never easy, although it is the one constant in our lives. It is necessary, however, if we're going to progress and stay current with the changing demands of our time. So to begin today's discussion, I offer this short prayer. May I notice my judgments as they arise, and may I come to know the root of my judgments. May I respond with loving awareness. We've had a lot of people volunteer to help today, and the first ones I'm going to mention is Rama Kotra. He actually contacted me and said he'd be happy to be a facilitator, which I think is courageous. So he will. He'll be facilitating today's panel discussion. We also have Rich Williams, who agreed to serve as our timekeeper, and we have a tight schedule, and so Rich is going, yeah. Yeah.
My voice is usually loud enough. Thank you very much. I'll just give visual step verbal cues. So I'll raise your hand. Just to allow you to know when you're 10. Thought it was. There it is. Okay, thank you. I'll raise a hand to let you know when it's about 10 seconds before the close year, whether it's 1 minute or 2 minutes, and just as gracious to you. And then perhaps if we go too long for a speaker, I may rise, and then sit back down, just to let you know. Thank you.
Yeah. Rich assured me he can handle this. He said he was a referee in college, so. Okay, I'm going to turn this now over to Rama.
Thank you, Kay. I suggested to Rich that in addition to rising, he also be prepared to approach the stage if luck is pushed, or approach the person if they go on, but it's up to him. I'm really glad that the three people that preceded me said many things that are, from my perspective, in the realm of setting the tone. So I will abbreviate what I'm going to say and just share with you some of the things that guide me. And these are going to sound awfully familiar to you. You know, I'm thinking of inherent worth and dignity of everybody here in this room, compassion in our relationships with each other, accepting and encouraging each other, engaging in free and responsible search for meaning, and use of a democratic process. So all those might sound familiar to you. I also came across a very interesting and nice words recently attributed to Karl Popper, who is a scientist as well as a philosopher, and I'm still chewing on those. And so this is very short. Let me just read that to you. The way forward has to be paved with nuance and understanding. This echoes the philosopher Karl Popper's excellent observation. It is rare, Popper pointed out, that in an exchange between two respectful participants, one will succeed converting the other. But it's equally unusual for either of them to go away from the properly conducted conversation with precisely the same position as that from which they began. Refinements will have occurred, we hope. Initial positions will have undergone a degree of modification, and the sum of human knowledge improves accordingly. So I will just say, borrowing a phrase, may that be so today. Will the panel please come here? And we have four panelists, as you know. Susan Bennett, Craig Bennett, sit in any order you like. Susan will begin her remarks, and Susan and Craig will represent what I would describe as supportive of the revisions for Article 2. And then Steve Myles and Eric Goplerud will represent a perspective where they have some concerns about the revisions. So that'll be the order: Susan, and then Steve, and then Craig, and then Eric. Each will have 6 minutes to present their viewpoint, and then we'll have all of them speak, and then we'll open it up for a discussion. As it's already been said, Rich will be the timekeeper, and then Julia Williams will circulate with the microphone, and anyone here or online will have 2 minutes to state their statement or ask their question, and then we'll proceed with the response from a specific panel member if they're asked specifically, or any of them for that matter. And then when it's all done at the end, we'll have some fun, because we will then get a chance to put the panel on a sort of a warm seat, maybe not a hot seat, but we'll just wait for that. So with that, I'm going to hand it off, and Susan.
Thank you, Rama.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, and thank you for taking the time to be here and engage in this important conversation that is taking place across our denomination. I was a delegate for UUCF to the 2023 General Assembly in Pittsburgh, and I voted in favor of the Article 2 revisions because I believe that the revisions will help us articulate our UU values and beliefs more clearly than we have in the past. In the 32 years that I've been a UU, I've seen time and again how challenging it is for UUs to describe our faith. I was no different than many of us, especially in my early years of being a UU. I was much more comfortable saying what UUs did not believe than what we do believe. I also voted for the revisions because it places love at the center of our faith, which I believe is true and has been the case throughout the history of both Unitarianism and Universalism. The
Look at how
Universalists of
grumpy
the
he
18th
is.
and 19th century
He's the
made the
dissenter
heretical
out here.
claim that, that the
This guy.
nature of
He doesn't
God
think
is
that they should
love.
change from the
19th century
principles to
Unitarians also
values.
understood God as basically loving. In the 21st century, we've broadened and in some cases removed notions of God or the divine from religious life, but we have held on to love. I well remember the first time I marched with UUs on the side of love at Minneapolis Pride at GA in 2010. We made quite a sight, a sea of yellow t-shirts marching out of the convention hall to the nearby Pride event. And it felt like we were taking one small action to live our faith out loud in the world. The press called us the love people, and I began to see at that time that my faith required something of me. I endorsed the call to action embedded in the proposed new Article 2 because I believe that our UU faith calls on us to live out our values both in our congregations and in the wider world. This has never been more true than it is today. Racism is on the rise in this country. Our democracy is under attack. Our rights to bodily autonomy are under assault. The environment is in crisis, to name just a few of the challenges we face. These challenges demand our engagement as people of faith, and I believe the new Article 2 will give us better words and guidance to move forward in the work that is ahead of us. Another reason I support the revisions is because of the explicitly anti-racist, anti-oppression language in it. For as long as I've been a UU, people have been talking about building the beloved community of all souls, creating multicultural communities, and yet we have fallen short of that ideal in many cases and for many reasons. In the history of our denomination, there are many instances where we have failed the very people that we profess to want to include in our movement. If you're not familiar with the history of anti-racism efforts in our denomination, there are lots of resources available. I recommend reading The Arc of the Universe is Long as a place to start. I don't think it's possible to understand what is currently going on in our movement without some knowledge of that history. In 2021, partially in response to the call to do so by Black Lives of UU, our own Racial Justice Steering Committee, and many of our lay leaders, UUCF adopted the 8th principle, which says, as I hope you know, it's posted in the lobby, we, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. At the GA in 2017, six and a half years ago, the delegates made clear their support of adopting the 8th principle, and the UUA board responded to that by reminding us that we were actually past due for the every 15 years review of Article 2 required by the UUA bylaws, and suggested that the best way forward was to review the whole of Article 2, including the 7 principles, with the idea that the 8th principle could be incorporated in some way. This was all prelude to the UUA board's charge to the Article 2 Study Commission in 2020. Currently, more than 200 UU congregations have now adopted the 8th principle, and more are doing so every day in spite of the revisions proposed to Article 2. In closing, I believe that listening to the voices of youth, young adults, and others who have been marginalized in our faith is fundamental to our remaining relevant in the future and to our being a vibrant and robust faith which will continue to make the world a better place. As Reverend Abhi Janamachi, who grew up in India and is now the minister of our Potomac partner congregation, Cedar Lane, said at GA in 2008, when he called on UUs to embrace the pluralism of a world of strangers and to welcome people like himself who have a multi-hyphenated identity, he said, the center of Unitarian Universalism lies outside of itself. in the stranger, in difference rather than similarity. In our faith, the margins hold the center. I believe this to be true. Thank you.
Is this working? I guess it is. Good afternoon. I'm Steve Myles. I'm a 21-year member of UUCF and a UU for over 47 years. I'd like to thank the board, and I'd like to thank everyone who showed up here today for making this discussion possible, and especially Kay for all the work you've put in. We've got only 3.5 months before the final proposal to rewrite Article 2 will be voted on in GA. If it passes, it's going to define the character of UU for the next 15 years. I have only time to cover 4 concerns with the proposed rewrite. These are not simple word changes. These are not simple word changes. They represent a change in the character of our religion. The study commission chose their words carefully. That's what they said. Why are these changes needed? What were the problems with Article 2? I'll start at the end of the document, the freedom of belief section. Freedom of belief is perhaps the one defining characteristic of Unitarian Universalism. The proposal puts it in jeopardy. We go from nothing shall be deemed to infringe on the individual freedom of belief to congregational freedom and the individual's right of conscience are central to our UU heritage. That's lines 62 and 63 if you're following along. Right of conscience is not the same as freedom of belief. Nothing shall be deemed to infringe becomes central to our heritage. Ask the NRA which phrase they would prefer in the Second Amendment. Why is this change necessary? The second major concern is in the inclusion section. The words say, we strive to be an association of congregations that truly welcome all persons. The proposal adds, who share our values. That's line 58. We don't need to exclude anyone. Newcomers to UUCF can readily ascertain what we are like by seeing the rainbow sign on Hunter Mill Road. They will decide for themselves. Why is an exclusionary addition needed? My third concern is in the purposes section. Here, the purpose of the UUA changes from serving the congregations to assisting the congregations. That's line 5. The rewrite further states in lines 11 and 12 that it will actively engage its members. Assisting and actively engaging congregations give a very different impression than serving congregations. Is Boston trying to increase direction and control? My last concern is covenants with accountability. Our new UUA president, Sophia Betancourt, has said, covenant without consequence is not really covenant. Covenants, of course, are an agreement or a promise. Section 2 of the rewrite, lines 17, 18, and 19, says that we are accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values. What others? Other congregations? Other UUs? What consequences will there be if we don't measure up? These are not explained. Yet, we're barreling ahead with an accountability launch team which held a kickoff meeting a week or so ago right here in DC. Seeds of change are already planted. In 2017, a committee on reimagining covenant recommended congregations reapply for membership every 2 years, showing they are fulfilling the UU purpose. That purpose is stated in the charge that the UUA Board of Trustees gave to the Study Commission. The Commission is instructed to explicitly call us to be committed to active anti-racism. That's what it says. It's not a stretch to imagine a congregation being judged insufficiently committed to anti-racism and refused readmission to the UUA. There are other ways to become more anti-racist, in my view. We can create programs similar to what we did with Welcoming Congregation or Green Sanctuary, showing congregations how to become more anti-racist. No change is needed to Article 2. Why do we need more covenants? We didn't need them to advocate for marriage equality at the Fairfax County Courthouse or to protest at the NRA month after month. No covenant was needed for us to shelter homeless folks in our facilities. We act from our hearts and our consciences, not from covenant statements in a document. Freedom of belief in jeopardy, an exclusionary welcome, multiple covenants with accountability and consequences, and a leadership actively engaging its member congregations toward their specific goal. The amendments to be considered at GA24 in June do not address any of these. We could be stuck with them for the next 15 years. And I can assure you that I'm not the only one who would be worried about the change of direction the Article 2 proposes. But you might not know this. A few folks in Boston don't get to say what our religion does. You do. But members of UU congregations like yourselves were not listed as stakeholders in the study commission's final report. Imagine that. Boston has a stranglehold on all communications. And if this is the first time you're hearing about serious concerns with this proposal, you're not alone. No dissenting opinions have been allowed by Boston in print or online. You have not been told of websites containing articles and videos by ministers and college professors holding different points of view. Instead, the former UUA president in her farewell address at GA23 in June likened these people to white nationalists clinging to some fabricated imagination of the past. Those are her words. Some of those who have publicly spoken out have been shunned and canceled. This is wrong. In our quest to become an anti-racist, beloved community, we've lost our way. Does the Article 2 rewrite represent the religion you want to pass to your children or your grandchildren? If the rewrite passes, it will be for the next 15 years. If it's defeated, we will have more time to continue this important conversation, and it's complicated. We can thank the Study Commission for their work, vote no on GA24, and begin again in love to define what it means to be a member of a free-thinking, democratic religious community. A vote by secret ballot at our congregational meeting in June will give UUCF delegates a clear sense of what we as a congregation want. They can vote their conscience knowing full well that they're representing us. We voted for adopting an eighth principle. We can do no less for this proposal. Thank you.
Just 1, 2. Oh, I'm next. So I want to talk a little bit from the heart and my experience in the last few years of watching this process evolve and my experience at General Assemblies in the past. But I want to thank everybody, including all the fellow panel members, for being here today. This is really important and it's exciting. I think back to the day 32 years ago that I first walked through the door of a UU congregation, a couple of toddlers in tow, and one smarter than me was asking why at every turn. And I was searching for a community that I could raise those children in that shared my values. I was concerned about what kind of answers are they going to get to why from a child care worker or a teacher or somebody else. So we found that at the Unitarian Universalist Church, and then after they're gone, we stayed with it because it's become a part of who we are, a community of shared values. And that community is really important. This morning I was, first of all, it was a great service, very exciting. I like the rah-rah. But it was thrilling to see the people in here. This whole fall, seeing the new people come in every day, hearing the bell go when somebody signs the book, that energy is wonderful. And I want to capture that and sustain that. I don't want to do anything that's just divisive or dampens why people come here, what they're finding here, and why they stay, right? So, and I believe these revisions are responsive to the people that are coming into our association now and will be coming in the future in a way that maybe speaks to them, because a lot of these changes were from them. It wasn't a UUA idea. The commission, as you heard Kay say, solicited lots of information. They had a bunch of forums. I did some online forums during Zoom. I know several of you did too. So they've heard all these things, and then they're making the suggestion as best they can to what seems relevant to people, and then it'll get voted up or voted down. So in the 32 years I've been a UU, I've never seen an issue capture the imagination of everybody, especially when it comes to governance and how the association works like this. So for that, I'm grateful as sort of a policy geek that's gone to GAs. because generally most people care about their community. That's why they're here. They came here, and it's RE or it's the choir, and that's why they come back. But the broader association does do good things, and it's important that we pay attention. So I appreciate that we're all here doing that. A couple points, maybe my slant on some things. So having been around 30 years ago, our first congregation, you couldn't even use the word God in the sanctuary. You couldn't, because it was very perception that you're believing in magic or you're not towing the line or whatever. We've evolved a lot, in my opinion, to take back the language from the right and use the language that means something to us and put it in the right context. I'm going to read something. This probably isn't Craig Bennett's heart, but theology and religion are a method for critically engaging, articulating, and discussing the deep existential and ontological issues about human life. And I did have to look up ontological, but it's about what it means to be human in the cosmos. How are we related to all that is, including that which we hold to be most sacred? And how do we describe what it is that we hold most sacred? I want to talk a couple points, collective identity versus individualism. So there's a natural tension, right, between the collective identity of the association or any group and the individualism and the rights of the individual. So that's a common theme. I understand that, and that it is what it is. So I kind of want to raise that up. In my opinion, this is just me, and what I've observed is I wanted a community that shared my values. And so we covenant together to kind of make it clear to each other, this is kind of what we share. Doesn't mean anybody has to necessarily sign off on any particular belief. But the collective, the outward expression of the collective vision of where we want to go means a lot. And it means a lot to people that are new, that haven't been around like I have and been to a bunch of GAs and kind of figured it out. But the person that comes in on a Sunday morning because they've just had a divorce, they've just had a move, they've just had a child, there's just been a death in the family, and they're looking for community to support them, and we want to stay that place. As David said earlier, we're one of the healthiest congregations in the area, and that's, I don't know what the magic is necessarily, but it's true, and so, keeping that going and building for the future is really important. I want to talk about the love word a little bit. The principles and purposes of Article 2 calls on UUA members to engage in transforming the world through liberating love, right? Note, the word members in this context is member congregations. You and I are not members of UUA or the association. We are members of this congregation. The association of congregations is what the UUA is, and that's governed bottom up, right? We send delegates to General Assembly. General Assembly has their bylaws. There's a whole process if you want to change bylaws or change things. And generally, even those of us, and this was probably me for the first 4 or 5 times I went to General Assembly, didn't pay much attention to the plenary and the legislative sessions. That was, pretty dry stuff, but it's important. But I just kind of want to draw the distinction between members and the association and how that fits. No, neither the congregation nor the association is going to tell any individual person what they need to believe or withhold anything. I want to talk a little bit about inclusiveness, because my observation of this over the last few years of process of articulating our faith, our living tradition, right, it's on the front of our hymnal, has intentionally been responsive to marginalized voices. I mean, that was called out, and that was specifically given to the commission by the UA board as part of their charter, and that the board was being responsive to the delegates from the member congregations at previous General Assemblies. I was at the 2012 General Assembly in Phoenix, Arizona. There was a number of our congregants that were there as well. Ian's back there, yep. And it was a profound moment in my life as a UU, because Sheriff Arepo had the tent city, mistreating human beings. We went out there, and there's nothing like, we went out to when it supposedly was going to cool off at 9 o'clock at night. Imagine several dozen yellow school buses full of about 3,000 Unitarian Universalists all wearing their yellow love t-shirts. Love meant somebody. People understood that. They knew where it came from. They knew what our center board, what's keeping us upright. It can be kind of summed up in love. So as this thing has evolved towards love in the center, it really does make sense to me. And I can tell you at the plenary sessions the next day when they're doing governance, all those people that were out there in the 100-degree heat at 9 o'clock at night protesting Sheriff Arepo made it very clear to the association the leadership, the staff, this is what we want. We want to, we want to commit ourselves as Unitarian Universalists to becoming anti-racist, not just not racist, but anti-racist. It's a verb, it's action-oriented, anti-oppressive, and multicultural. More than just saying, hey, we'd like a little more diversity, but understanding why don't we have the diversity? What are the barriers we have in our existence to that? So that need to revisit those principles and those values, led to the 8th principle and got us here today. A little bit on the word equity. Actually, well, I do want to use this. There's lots of, we all like to, because we're all smart, we have a lot of degrees in this room, and we like to wordsmith, and not a big part of this, but it's an example, right? They changed the word worth to worthiness, right? And so not a big deal. That was done because worthiness, people were saying worthiness is more elegant, but there were voices out there that said, yeah, well, my ancestors had worth, and that was termed in money, and they were property, right? So worthiness implied a better way of framing it. So that's how a lot of these words came up. Am I done with time, Rich? All right, I'm done. Thanks.
Yeah. Hello, I'm Eric Goplerud. I'm a 40-year member of UUCF. There are 3 overarching process problems that the Article 2 rewrite has surfaced. 1, the UUA is becoming anti-democratic. 2, the UUA is becoming top-down. It knows what's right and will enforce its understanding of the right through covenant. And 3rd, the processes to craft the revision are opaque and manipulative. Article 2 has been modified in the past to correct errors and to address new understandings inconsistent with UU principles and values, such as sexist language. The UUA board created a study commission and directed it to write an anti-racist Article 2. Their charge, quote, "Our commitment to anti-racism, anti-oppression, and multiculturalism is love in action and should be centered in any revision of Article 2. The members of the study commission were specifically selected to write an anti-racism Article 2. The commission was co-led by the leader of the 8th Principle Project. The proposed article certainly meets the board's charge, exclusively and repeatedly calling out racism. Justice, quote, "We covenant to dismantle racism and all forms of systemic oppression." Inclusion, quote, "Systems of power, privilege, and oppression have traditionally created barriers. We pledge to replace such barriers." The process for developing and amending the proposal was opaque and arbitrary. The commission reported holding feedback sessions and conducting surveys, as Kay has mentioned, but they have released no information about these inputs. The commission placed all data, if there are data, under a privacy seal and have rejected repeated requests for summary data. The 2009 Article 2 Commission, on the other hand, produced a report backed by surveys and demographic statistics. In 2023, UU submitted over 500 amendments to the proposed Article 2. The study commission cut those down to 15. 13 were voted on. What happened to the other 485 plus amendments? No information is available. Also, unlike the 2009 revision, the 2023 Study Commission was allowed to comment on each amendment before the GA. When they spoke against an amendment, the amendment failed by 3-1. The UUA ignored the vote of the General Assembly on an amendment that received 78% affirmative votes. The original proposed language for interdependence said, quote, "We work to repair harm and damaged relationships." The adopted amendment for interdependence, which made a number of changes, stripped out that sentence. The Commission's final version, November 2023, for interdependence, quote, "We will work to repair harm and damaged relationships." It's absolutely clear that the UUA chose to ignore the vote of the delegates, reinstating language supporting anti-racism action. The process for reviewing and voting are brief and arbitrary. The revised Article 2 was released in January 2023 and voted on 6 months later. A final vote will be taken in June. The speedy process is unprecedented. It took 7 years for the 1985 changes to come about, which are the values and principles. In 2009, the GA voted down a revised Article 2 after 2 years of robust discussion. Unlike 2009, when concerns with the proposal were covered in the UU World, not a word of concerns about the 2023 proposal have been printed or covered online by the UUA. The Article 2 processes are consistent with, I believe, a drift towards top-down, anti-democratic control by the UUA through covenanting. As Steve has just mentioned, Reverend Betancourt, the current UUA president, states, quote, "Covenant without consequences is not actually covenant." She goes on to say, quote, "We have to be willing to say, you are not in covenant. You cannot be back in the community until you are willing to do the work of repair. You can always come home, but you got to come correct." Susan Frederick Gray stated, quote, "It is damaging when individuals break covenant, attack the motives of leaders, and insist on their own way against the will and vision of a community." What are the consequences of being out of covenant? Ministers and staff are dismissed, dissent is quashed. In the 59 years between 1961 and 2020, only 10 ministers were removed from fellowship for offenses such as sexual misconduct. Since 2020, 5 ministers have been removed for subjective offenses such as bullying. One recent example, which stuck in my craw, is that the UUA abruptly fired Alex Sherwood, a young staff person working with youth on the 2023 divestment resolution. He planned to speak in favor of the proposal. The UUA opposed divestment. Sherwood was fired and ordered to leave town immediately. Finally, the UUA leadership is perpetuating itself and its top-down centralized vision. Every open position since 2013 has had only one candidate. The UUA bylaws require at least 2 candidates for president to be put forward. In 2023, the Presidential Nominating Committee forwarded only 1. Elections become appointments. When a minister attempted to run for president through petition, the UUA changed the rules, doubling the number of congregations needed to nominate to 50 and shortening the campaign period. That's not democracy. I recommend that we reject the direction in which the UUA is leading us, reject the proposed Article 2, and return to the principles that have guided our liberal faith. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the panel and for your attentiveness. We're now going to enter the comment and discussion phase. And if there are any index cards anyone has completed, Julia will just hold them up and Julia will collect them from you. Okay, that can go on. Meanwhile, let me just ask Stacy, are there any comments or questions from online? Let's start with them. Okay, Stacy is requesting those online to type your questions into the chat. Could you do that? That's what you wanted, right? Okay, and if you could kindly do that, that would help. Okay, in the room, we'll move to a question here. Please go ahead.
Do I have to push something? No. Okay. So I do want to start out by saying that some of the things that were addressed by the panel, at least according to information that I have been in contact with, was actually false, and I'm not sure how we're going to correct things that were presented from the dais as truth that are not. I don't think anybody's being malicious, but I do think that needs to be interpreted correctly. I would like to ask the question about, it does occur to me, and as I look around the room, I think some of what we're dealing with is to some extent generational change. And I would like us all to think about what is the right thing for the future of this denomination. Not for me, not for you. We're going to be, I'm not planning to be on this earth by the time the next review comes around. So I really do feel like my contribution at this point is for the next generation. I know some people feel that the process was troubling. Some people's understanding of the process is different than my understanding of the process. And I do want people to realize that there are different interpretations about what the process actually was. I want us to think about, are these words, this call to action, the addition of all the verbs, which I personally like, and the call to anti-racism, which, thank you, which I think underlies a lot of people's concerns. Thank you very much.
Right. Any panelists, you're welcome to address in regard to an interpretation that something set up here was not correct or was false without specificity. I'm not sure anything can be done about that at this time. Do any panel members want to say anything? Yeah, go ahead.
I would just like to respond. I think Marcia raised some good points. What is the responsibility for us people who have been around for a while? And yes, there are a bunch of new UUs who are coming up. But I believe that we, as those human beings who have lived life and have seen what it does, we have a responsibility to impart that wisdom to those who are coming up. We know what an anti-liberal, undemocratic, we've heard about World War II and everything else. We know how bad it can get. I think we have to use our responsibility and our own experiences to leave a legacy for our children and our grandchildren that protects a free and democratic faith. Thanks.
Anyone else?
I would just add that if you're hearing something and you're not sure about it and you haven't done this yet, go to the web, look at the Article 2 Commission. They publish a lot of stuff, information. There's an FAQ there. Go to Steve Myles' email, read their stuff, some other websites that are out there. Understand that there's opinions that some of this isn't factual. Some people are, so do your own due diligence and come to your own decisions. That's all I can say.
Here's some due diligence if people want to.
Right. Yeah. Let's go online next. Steve, you can pass those out later. Go ahead, Stacy.
Let Ann Wood, we're going to unmute Ann Wood, and Ann Wood has a comment. 1 second. We're trying our best. Ann Wood, we've clicked the button Ask to Unmute, so can you try clicking unmute on your machine, Ann? I got disconnected on my, let's see, Ann, are you there? Okay, let's shift to another person and we'll get back to this.
Why don't we go on here?
I think I have the microphone.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. My name's Roberta Keever. I've been a member for a while, but I have not attended any of the GA conferences or anything like that. That's not what is good for me. So I depend on what's made available online and what's communicated to me through the congregation. I think this UUCF has been very responsive in communicating it, but it was a shock. To me, it was a shock. I didn't know this was happening. So I happen to agree in that I think this could have been done with more communication to me and us as members of congregations, because again, I don't go to GA. So all of this was very much of a surprise. And I had been reading, but it's still a surprise. So I wanted to ask, so I do have a question. I think it was Steve who said we should perhaps have a vote. And I wasn't sure, does that mean a vote by each member in each congregation, or how would you see that working? Because I like the vote. I mean, I personally, did I lose this? No. Not as a delegate congregation. I guess I hold this sometimes incorrectly. So just explain to me, Steve, what you mean by vote. And again, my feeling that I would like to be more actively involved in that kind of a process.
Thank you for asking that question. What I meant by vote was a vote here in UUCF. Another vote will take place in the General Assembly, where we send delegates to the General Assembly. I believe that we need to be totally informed on both sides of the issue so that everyone in this room can make up their own minds, that they hear all sides. And you haven't heard all sides. You've heard basically what comes out of the UUA. I think we need to take the time to have more discussions like this and hash things out. That's what we do as Unitarian Universalists. And then at our congregational meeting, we can hold a secret ballot vote, so no one has to stand up and say which way they're voting or anything else, so it's not divisive. And then the delegates that we send to GA can use their right of conscience to decide to either they're going to support, being a delegate and going with what the congregation said, which we hope they would. So that's the way the voting should go. But I don't think that 3.5 months between now and then is enough time to do all that. So that's my concern.
Any of the panelists want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, just real quick, having been on the board for a few years. So what Steve described was how we've never instructed our delegates at this congregation, most congregations don't, in how to vote at GA. We generally try to make sure they're educated, and we've done that the last few years. Anybody going to GA, we offered training, orientations, made sure they saw all the different sides of whatever was going to be talked about at that GA. Could we do a vote and then instruct delegates? Culturally, that's interesting, because people telling somebody how to vote. And the thing I would say about that is, having been to a number of General Assemblies, is you show up having read about a proposal, and then you watch people talk about it. It gets wordsmithed. What gets voted on the last day is not necessarily what was before the public, 3 weeks earlier. And you do have the opportunity, because of the dialogue on these things, to maybe change your own view. And you might have thought, I'm going to vote no on something, and then you get there and it's yes, or vice versa. So it's very complicated to start saying we're going to instruct. My experience has been, let's make sure delegates are informed as they can be, as they're interested in being, and let them vote their conscience.
Thank you. I have 2 questions here from the index cards. We're not going to spend time on them because in a way they've already been addressed. One pertains to the how to prepare for the GA process. I think you touched on the concept of voting. Mark, you may have some things to say later on about the whole GA process. Not as a moderator, but as a congregant, have a lot of questions about that. So in the future, hopefully I'll learn more. The other one on the index card is about, in regard to those who may have a dissenting view, not in support of the proposed revisions, could you please give us some cites or citations as to explain and read what lacks, what backs up their points? And I think that there's something that's circulating which gives you information on the sources where you can get the index cards that were circulated. You can access additional information that does back up, I think, some of the things that have been said. If that doesn't, you know who the individuals are, so you can track them down. Anything else online? Go ahead.
Hello? Anne, can you try again to unmute and then say what your comment is? I know. Are you there, Anne? Well, while we're waiting for Anne to unmute, and you can, Anne, at any time, let's look at Martha's comment. Considering the importance of this issue and considering that we do not ask our GA delegates to vote the will of the congregation, I believe it's important for delegates to at least understand what the sense of the congregation is on the issue. So I support Steve's suggestion of having a congregation vote on this before GA. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions in the room? Yeah, right there, Vicki. Okay, so the mic's over there or here? Let's go with Betsy after that, Vicki.
Okay, there we go. Red means go, not green in this case. So I was particularly disturbed by some of the things that Steve said about the possibility of congregations being disassociated with the UUA. And so I have a few questions really about that. Right now, can the UUA kick out congregations? Can it kick out us individual members? Can the UUA kick out ministers? Will this change with the revisions to Article 2? How will the new values change the relationship between UUCF and the UUA?
Do you want me to help with a few of that?
Well, I'll take a stab at it, but can you give me the first couple, and then I'll...
Okay, the first series is a kind of like, what can the UUA do? Can it kick out congregations, individual members, like me, ministers, and will it change with Article 2?
All right, okay. So the UUA is a voluntary association of congregations. The UUA asks us to pay our fair share dues to support the association. UUCF hasn't done that for, 10 years? Okay, so they haven't been able to compel us to do that. We're still members, and we still enjoy all the services that they provide to us. So, I think it's possible that a congregation could do something so out of line with UU values that they might be asked to disassociate, but as far as I know, that's not happened. As far as ministers are concerned, and this was raised by one of the other panelists, the idea that more ministers are being held accountable for their actions is true. And in my view, that's a good thing, because my understanding of it is that for many years, a blind eye was turned to some pretty terrible behavior by ministers. So that is the explanation for why there are more ministers being censured by the UUA. The UUA can do that because they run a process to accredit ministers, which we, on the congregational level, should be very grateful for, because how else would we vet individuals who are going to serve our congregations?
Okay, any other panelists want to weigh in?
Okay.
Will any of this change with the revisions to Article 2?
Not to my knowledge.
I just want to respond to the minister's question. There have been ministers who have been defellowshipped from the UUA in the past 5 years. Let's be honest. One for writing a book, and another for basically supporting his writing of the book. That's, in my mind, inexcusable reasons for dismissing a UU minister, but there have been UU ministers who have been defellowshipped.
David,
Okay, hold on. I have to say, that is not true. The reason that he was defellowshipped was because he refused to participate in the process of addressing concerns that people had about the harm that had been done.
Can I respond to that?
Yes. Yes, I will give it to you when I'm done, sir.
Go ahead.
Okay. So that is a very different thing from saying that he was defellowshipped because he wrote a book.
It was a coercive process. He didn't enter that process because the people were basically holding him accountable for something that he wrote. He did not want to participate in that.
So I'm really glad to hear this diversity of views today. Let's ask Reverend David, do you want to weigh in on something? Give him a minute, maybe.
No, can I have him? I wanted to clarify that. Oh, thank you. I wanted to clarify that the UUA does not defrock anybody. Right. There is something called the Ministerial Fellowship Committee, and the Ministerial Fellowship Committee is made up of professional leaders in the UUA and lay leaders in the UUA. And they're the ones who make decisions about whether someone should be in fellowship or not. There's no such thing as defrocking in our tradition. I'm tentative to say this. Hold it like, grasp it higher. Thank you. I've never used a mic before, so. I don't want to get involved in the discussion. I just want to say that I was there and I was part of the team that was supposed to meet with that minister, and he refused to meet with us. So it's more complicated than just he wrote a book. And we don't need to get into that. I mean, I don't want to get into it like that. But I do want to say that the complications of how ministers I'm sorry, I'm just trying to think. The one more thing I want to say is that ministers have been defellowshipped by the Ministerial Fellowship Committee a lot more in the last 10 years, which ministers think is good, because there's been a lot of behavior that I know I know as a minister has been swept under the table, and good old boy network crap and all kinds of stuff that is now being addressed in ways that really needed to be addressed.
So as a moderator.
That will not change at all with revisions. The Ministerial Fellowship Committee process will not change at all.
Hang on, Stacy. What I'm hearing today, this may be not the best thing to do as a moderator. I think it's insufficient to say that things are more complicated than that. If they are, we need to have a broader, deeper discussion, and I hope we do in the future. Vicky's been waiting. Is it Ann up there? Okay, Ann, we'll give Ann one more chance, and if that doesn't work, we'll go to Vicky. Ann, go ahead. All right. Let's go with Vicki.
Somebody call Ann.
Put her on the phone. Yeah, put her on the phone. Want to use this one?
Sure. Hi, my name is Vicki. I am a millennial. I am an old millennial at that, but I am looking around, and I might have to represent my point of view as a youth as best as possible. I've been a board member. This is my 3rd year. I was a delegate at GA 2023, and I joined UUCF November 2016, if anyone remembers that. I also participated in the Wellspring that Susan Kay facilitated. So I'm just going to speak what I appreciate about Article 2, and from what I know of my fellow millennials, I think maybe this might be an important inclusion. First, there are 2 that really stuck out to me. One is interdependence. That being spelled out more clearly and not just sort of as an afterthought is really important. I've been raised basically with global warming being the #1 issue of my entire life. I have things called, I have a little bit of guilt over it almost in every decision I make. So it's really important to me that that was really spelled out, like the earth is actually written in there. It's not just about the interdependence of the web of life. Second is transformation. I am a big follower of Adrienne Marie Brown, and she talks about emergent strategy and how the world is constantly changing and we have to continue to adapt. I think that's really important that we understand in our values how important it is to be vulnerable to that change and to accept that kind of transformation, you know, in not individual, but also in community. So just speaking from the heart there.
Thank you. I think we should probably proceed to. Okay, there's the 2. Ernie and then lady back there.
Good afternoon. My name is Ernest Austin. I've always had mixed feelings about the 8th principle. I always thought it was not needed because the first principle, I think, covers a lot of the ground that the 8th principle is intended to cover, the worth and dignity of every human being. That said, I have two questions. Oh, sorry. I have 2 questions. Question number 1, why the emphasis on racism when there are so many other forms of oppression in this country, like inequality? And 2, why did so many Unitarian Universalists come to see the 7 principles as a rather passive set of principles, when in fact the 7 principles call us all to engage in correcting the evils of this, or the problems of this world? Thank you.
I'm going to take that as in the realm of a comment. There's a hand up here, right there. And after that, we'll give one more shot. Stacy.
Is this on? Mine is also in the realm of a comment. I felt like I needed to speak for my generation because it has been brought up, of the younger generation that is now raising future UUs. And I was raised by this faith. I was not raised in this faith, as my parents did not really buy in until after I started going. And when I say I was raised by this faith, what really brought me in as like a covenant of faith was that the tradition in my church was every week this was spoken. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Those were my guiding principles. So the fact that this document now reframes our principles with a grounding in love and a grounding in covenant, I think that's the overarching thing that we need to see from this. Not failures of the process, not failures of the wording in being very specific, and not potential future failures in its execution. So I just wanted to state that.
Thank you. Is it 3rd time the charm? Right, 4th time the charm? 5th time the charm? There's a conference underway outside the doors, so.
I think it's loud enough. Okay, see it. Please talk, Ann.
Okay, I'm talking as loud as as I can.
I hear someone.
From Reston Hospital. I would like to associate myself with Eric Goplerud's comments. I've been in the church for 50 years, and it was the free form, the ability to explore everything that brought me to my passion for social justice and my support for anti-racism. And I attended GA for a couple of years during the pandemic. And recently, I tried to support amendments. The process was so convoluted and difficult that an amendment that had the support of all the little breakout discussion rooms never got approved. It was just an extremely difficult process. And I am particularly concerned over the idea of censorship, of getting to a point where things are not allowed. And I asked our delegates to support the 7 principles. I thought that would make a huge difference to include the 7 principles, but that was never done. So that is my input. Okay.
Thanks very much, Anne, for the extra attempts to reach us here. I'll take that as in the realm of a comment, and I think we are very close to moving to the next. Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. Really inspired Vicki. Thank you for calling out generational. I had some generational thoughts too. I do have a lot of thoughts on the principles, believe me. I'll try not to share them all. But I want to say that I agree with Marcia. I like having more verbs. I like really rethinking some of these principles, taking this away from the process. I do like how it ended up. There are some principles now that don't do much for me, such as the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. If that line were one of the new principles, I would be opposed to it. It's simplistic and frankly jingoistic. In reading the new principles, I like ways to think about how to reach a goal of world community. World community is a great goal, such as protecting Earth and all beings from exploitation, dismantling racism, which is critically important, and all forms of system oppression, working to repair harm and damaged relationships, which I think is so critical for all of us. What I'm saying about generational, though, is I am a proud Gen Xer. I am as well on the top end of the Gen X. What that means, though, is I am well steeped in the ways of my baby boomer brethren. And I know the traditions. I can code switch very effectively to speak the terms that resonate with baby boomers. Getting older, though, seeing treasured traditions change, it's hard, and it's happening to me too, so I know how hard it is. But I am a dyed-in-the-wool Xer. We have seen loss our entire generation. We were the latchkey generation. Divorce rates skyrocketed with our parents. We had cartoons to tell us how to make our own snacks. So it would probably not be a surprise, thank you, that Article 2, for me, doesn't really matter. These two versions are pretty much two sides to the same imperfect but beautiful coin. And it doesn't surprise me that some of my baby boomer brethren are saddened by this, seeing as a loss. But keep in mind, neither of those two reactions represent the spectrum of thoughts from other generations that are still yet to be born about these new principles.
Thanks, Stacy. We probably do need to move on. Kay, is that right? Okay, someone seized the microphone over there, so I will not turn him away. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. I became a UU in the UU Fellowship of Mobile, Alabama, where we didn't have our sign stolen. We had to repair bullet holes in the sign. That's where we were a blue dot. And I'm in conversation with those people. They know about Article 2. They're following the progress. My 17-year-old has been following the progress. My old friends in Charlottesville have been following the progress. It is astounding to me that we're talking now about opacity or that people are not following this. I'm not sure that's true. That is not my experience. Marcia kind of jumped on me on Facebook when I used the word open discussion because she thought I was referring to some closedness in this process. I'm not buying it.
Okay, David and then Cy.
Oh, okay, thank you. David Michael, I'm a member of the congregation. I have a comment and a question that I'd love to hear both sides of the panel address. To my mind, pluralism is meaningless without a strong support of a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, as embodied in our fourth principle. I'm troubled by the process held by the UUA and by this congregation around discussion of the eighth principle and Article 2. As to me, these processes at times embraced a reductionism of these issues into pro and con, into a binary and simplified discussion, and as a result, to my mind, have limited many voices and the pluralism that we need. At the same time, if the draft Article 2 that we're considering is a concerted effort by the UUA to quell debate or to otherwise centralize authority, this Article 2 draft, to me, has miserably failed. It just doesn't seem to do that if that is the intention. So I want to move beyond this debate and to the conception of whatever the future will be after GA 2024. And so regardless of whether Article 2 succeeds or fails, the question that I pose to the panel is what efforts can we make to better support pluralism by the inclusion of the diverse voices that our faith needs?
Panel? Someone like to take that on, or no?
We are a congregational polity. We're the ones that make the decisions, who bring people in, who have these discussions. And to a very large extent, you know, and I guess I'm sort of on the con side, I want to say that to a large extent, whatever gets voted in GA doesn't make a whole lot of difference to what we do right here. And if we want to have the voices of pluralism, then we need to actively make that pluralistic commitment. And that, you know, I really like, I'm a boomer, I like the 7 principles because I recognized myself in that. I said, wow, I really am a UU, and I like that. A flower doesn't do it to me. But, you know, I can understand other people have different ways. But the important part is that we as a congregation are the polity. We're the ones that make the decisions, and how we act and how we have acted in the past. Anti-racism, anti-gun, anti-military, anti-imperialist, pro-democracy, pro-environment, all of those things, they didn't come from the GA. They didn't come from the UUA. They came from us as a community. The biggest concern I have is something that Steve mentioned, is the phrase shared values. I got in here because, no, I didn't share values with my home church. I thought this was really terrific that I could be by myself deciding what I believed. That really concerns me about this Article 2.
1 minute for any other panelists if they choose. If not, that's fine. Cy, and then maybe David after that.
Hi, I'm Cy Schuster. I'm a 30-year UU. I would say first I have a concern about the speed of the process, regardless of the value of Article 2. I have seen the diagram with love at the center. I have not seen the detailed language of accountability and these very specific changes. So that's new to me. And I would say there's a danger in changing any fundamental set of principles quickly without great communication and buy-in, because if those pass with such a speedy process and without communication, there's a backlash that comes with that. But I would like to ask the panelists who are in favor of the process, of the proposed changes, to answer this question. What problem are you trying to solve, and can you specify how that language is solving the problem?
In 1 minute or less.
Okay, it's a very good question. Well, you know, I am not personally trying to solve the problem, but the problems, the issues that have come, I made reference to it in my opening remarks about the history of the way that we have treated people of color in our denomination, and the voices of those people who have been on the margins asking us to do things to be more inclusive, to live into our values, to live into our principles. That is, in my view, why we are where we are with this. That it is not enough, you know, when I was first a UU, the joke was everybody knows the first principle and the seventh principle, and then all that stuff in the middle is, you know, kind of fuzzy, right? It's an attempt to get people to really ask themselves, what does it mean to be a Unitarian Universalist? We haven't always done that very well, in my view. And that's, well, I think it is an imperfect attempt, as all of these will be. And maybe in 15 years, they'll get it better. But you know, it's just like this congregation. There's a lot of volunteers serving on boards, serving on commissions, doing the best that they can.
Okay, thanks. We made a couple of exceptions to the procedure, so I'll make one more, Steve, and then after that, Dave. Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I hear what people are saying about love, and there's things that I like about the proposal. The proposal gave me a new way to think about the principles. Instead of thinking of them as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I got to thinking of them as in a circle. And the question that I would ask those who have mentioned love as so important, how come or why isn't love in the middle of it right now? I think it is. I mean, we don't need, Article 2 is, you know, is the rewrite is not in place yet, and we have love here. It's at the center of our work. We don't need a whole new Article 2 written to say that we have love in the center. In fact, that was the motivation for my putting this diagram together, with love in the center of our 7 principles.
So potentially one more handout to share. David. Yeah.
Hello, I'm David Addis. I've been a member for 31 years. I'm going to pick up the gauntlet thrown down by Vicki and Stacy as a boomer. You know, Eric said he read the principles and he saw himself. And I know exactly what he means, right? Because many of us were fleeing some kind of rigid religion that told us what to think. And we wanted some place that started by assuring us, you don't have to, we're not going to tell you what to believe. That was a core value we needed to find each other. This generation, now I'm speaking about somebody else, so you got to take my words at whatever value they are. But they are not coming from that. They are the nuns. They're out there in the world all by themselves. They got YouTube and Twitter. And they are looking for connection. They're looking for community. They're looking for words that say to them, we're going to do this together. We're in this together. We're going to do stuff together. Here's what we're going to do. Here's why you should be with us. So I love the 7 principles, but I'm going to listen to Vicki because people, Eric, you and I are not the growth of our movement. Vicky is the growth of our movement. And we need to listen to Vicky.
So thank you, David. I think that'll be the very last. Bob, you've been, okay, all right. Are you sure? Okay. YouTube and Twitter, borrowing from Bob Dylan, have mercy on your souls. Yeah. So we're done now with the general Q&A comment part. We now have one of the treats that I'm looking forward to. So I'm not going to call on each panelist, starting with Susan, to present a question to the other side. Susan, and then Steve, and then Craig, and then Eric.
Okay, I guess my question would be, what are your hopes and dreams for the future of Unitarian Universalism in the next 15 years?
In 1 minute or less.
My hope and dream is that we become more influential and we stay together. I am afraid that what I'm seeing happen nationwide is a schism, and that bothers me a lot. I love this faith. This faith has spoken to me for 47 years, and yeah, I'm a boomer. So that's my hope, is that we don't let this tear us apart.
Okay, Steve, it's your turn to ask the other members a question.
I guess the main question I would ask is, why do you feel the current principles cannot be modified to accomplish what you are saying you want to have done?
I guess I would say this is a pretty extensive process. It wasn't anything I wanted to have done or any individual person wanted to have done. We just decided we needed to revisit the process. So what's before us now is the latest draft is the answer to that question. They engaged thousands of people over 3+ years, right? So if you're just learning about it, I'm sorry. But I would say it is what it is, even if I can't quite understand it because of my age. Oh, I get to ask. So this is, I want to, David Cope made a comment, because I talked about the vote and the challenges of doing a vote. And David Cope made a point that you could do a vote that just informs delegates, not to hold them binding, right? And this really, that's a rational middle ground. What I would ask, and this is maybe a rhetorical question, not to put you guys on the spot too much, but having been, between the two of us, we've chaired 4 annual meetings. There's less than 50 people here today. There are 550 people in our congregation. It's really hard to get a sense. I go down to the playground and chat with people and learn all kinds of stuff. So if we held a meeting, even if we'd started a year ago trying to talk about it, we've been trying, right? We've got 50 people. How many people do you think would show up and vote on this issue if we try to have a vote? It's kind of rhetorical, but I'm just trying to be honest about the reality of governing and democracy and how ugly it is sometimes.
This congregation makes its decisions at the annual meeting of however many people show up, and I would say that that's it's not any kind of a scientific sample, it's the people who are willing and who show up, and that's how we as a congregation make our decisions. So I would say it's a reasonable place. And then I guess hey, I get the last one.
Oh, I get the last question. You're going to ask a question? Oh,
yes,
okay.
Which is, regardless of whether we get the old or our current 7 principles or the new article, how do you see that having an impact on our congregation, one way or the other?
Oh, yes. Right.
They said they are young, they want to see something else, they want to hear something else, they want those ideas in a different way, and they need to hear it. And the other thing that I didn't say before but really want to say is there are actual Russians trying to take over our country. We need to worry about actual democracy in the country. Spend your time on that.
Well, I'm not sure I can add to that, Kendra, but I would say it, like everything else, it is a question of whether people are willing to engage. I mean, we have the same issue with the 8th principle. We passed it, And leadership and others are trying to live it out in this congregation. Do we have the will to do that as a group? You know, sometimes we do, sometimes we don't.
Is there another comment back there? Recap what she said. She said it so well. She said it so well, right. So what was basically said was that the question that Eric asked, in a way, had already been answered earlier by some of the participants from Gen X, as well as the upper millennial crust, I suppose is the way to describe it. The very last thing for the panel, I know we're way over time, Kay, is now I'm going to ask each panelist to express what they agree with the other side, starting with Susan.
Well, I would say that what I agree with is that really this does not necessarily going to affect us all that much, which I think you said, Eric. You know, we do have congregational polity, and we will do as we see fit, as we always have.
Steve?
I'm hopeful that it helps us to recruit and to retain younger people, because they are really the future. And so regardless of what comes out of this, really helping us to live our values that resonate with the generations that are coming.
Craig?
I guess I would agree that this experience and exercise is real positive, and I'm glad the questions were brought up, and I would agree that let's explore it. And you know, there's plenty of information, there's still time to look at it, to at least understand it so your own soul can go to bed at night worrying about this stuff. So.
And Steve?
I think that that the best thing that we have done, and there are a lot of people here, a lot more than came to the previous ones. I think that's testament to the work that Kay and the board and everyone else who has done this has done. I think we need to continue it. I think we need to have more of these, regardless of what the outcome comes. I think we need to be thinking about this.
Okay, with that, we will close the panel process. Let's give them a applause and a thank you. And to everyone who has participated, commented, or asked questions, I'm going to turn this over now to Mark.
You're welcome to Good afternoon. Essentially, I'm here to talk about what is General Assembly, how would you apply if you want to participate, and how to apply to be a delegate. And I'm doing that as a member of the Leadership and Nominating Committee. Now, I fully realize I'm the only one standing between you and the rest of your Sunday afternoon, and we've already been here almost 2 hours, so I'm going to keep this fairly efficient and brief. And there are going to be other opportunities later in this church year in the spring to learn more about General Assembly writ large. So I'm going to go ahead, call an audible. We won't go ahead with the video. It's about a minute and a half long. What I would just encourage everyone to do is you can go online and you can search for UUA General Assembly, and you hit that link and it pops up basically a 1.5 minute video on what GA is all about. Essentially, though, I'll just get to the nuts and bolts of why I'm here today. First off, just a show of hands. Who here has either been to GA or essentially knows what General Assembly is? Okay, that helps. All right. So specifically, General Assembly is the annual meeting of the denomination. And that is where business before the denomination that has to be voted on and settled by the denomination occurs, such as a vote about Article 2 changes. But that won't be the only item on the business agenda this year. Several things take place annually at General Assembly. General Assembly usually runs about 4, sometimes 5 days, usually from a Wednesday. I think this year is Thursday through a Sunday. About a quarter to half the time is spent in business meetings, or what's called general session, where you vote or you hear reports from UUA leadership or related associations such as Beacon House Press, etc. But there's also a fair amount of time that's actually devoted around to either workshops or seminars on a vast array of topics, from the spiritual to the very practical, that you as a participant or a delegate can attend. I know I've gotten a lot out of them. I've been to 2 General Assemblies. I went to the one in New Orleans in 2017 and the one the previous year in 2016 in Columbus, Ohio. What a real treat for me was, and I would just ask that you keep an eye out, or maybe just kind of think about this if there's any RE parents, is that I went with my youngest child, and she participated in the Youth Caucus, which is a pretty vibrant element of General Assembly. It was pretty neat. So in addition to that, there's also some other annual programming. There's things like the Service of the Living Tradition. There's the WARE Lecturer, which the UUA invites a prominent member of society to talk to us, to essentially give an address. And there's also the Sunday AM service, which is pretty moving. There's a lot more than that. I mean, there's music and there's singing and there's, we could probably be here for the next half hour describing exactly all the specifics of General Assembly. But I will say that as it is a pretty meaningful time to come together with fellow UUs to do whatever is on the program, as well as just get together and network. This year it's a little different from the past in that it's going to be 100% online. 100% virtual. Now, there's been a virtual component to General Assembly for many years now, not even withstanding the pandemic. And that was really to broaden participation and accessibility. Last year it was in Pittsburgh. This year it's 100% virtual. Next year it's just right up the road in Baltimore. Okay? How to attend GA. Anyone can attend GA. You can participate in GA. You do not have to be a delegate from UUCF to do so. Okay, I'll say that again. You do not have to be a delegate to participate in General Assembly. Now, General Assembly is not free. If you go online, and that's what you would do, and I've got the links, and it's in the weekly, bulletin, thank you. The links are all there, but essentially you go online right now, you register online, it's $280 per person through the 15th of March. After the 15th of March it goes up, after the 15th of March until about mid-May it goes up to $315, and then after that it goes up to $400. So obviously the earlier register the better. There is a fee for youth that do want to attend, although it's a bit lower. This year I've noticed there is a business-only option, so that if you are a delegate and you are going to vote, and that's all you want to do, then the UUA is just asking that you make a donation, whatever that may be. So yes, it does come with a cost. I think my own observation is there's a lot that goes into it, so there's a fair amount of expense, I'm sure, in putting this on. And there are ways, both online and possibly in our congregation, to help people if they need some assistance in paying the registration fee. Now, if you want to go beyond being there and be a delegate, there's a process for that. Now, first off, what's the difference between being there and as a participant versus being a delegate? Simply put, a delegate gets to vote. Right? This year, UUCF will have 12 delegates to General Assembly. That number is determined by the size of our congregation. The bigger you are, the more delegates you get. In past years, I know that we have, as a congregation, not used all our delegate slots. I think last year, however, we did. We had all of them taken up, and we had actually some alternates named. So we have a process. The Leadership and Nominating Committee has a process for that, which I'll describe in just a second. But I know as of this morning, there were at least 3 individuals who have already put in an application to be a delegate from UUCF. So since we only have, we always have just a limited number, 12 this year, I would urge that anyone who does want to be a delegate, get your application in soon. The LNC runs the process for selecting, first off, educating the congregation about General Assembly, doing the outreach, and then putting forward a slate of nominees that we then move to this, the coordinating team, and the coordinating team actually goes ahead and approves them. What is the requirement for being a delegate? Well, you have to really be simply a voting member of UUCF. Now, breaking that down, that really means three things. You're a member, Steve saw in the book. Two is, as we actually heard earlier today, you participate in our own general meeting every year in June and you vote. And third is that you essentially are a member in good standing. That's, you've made your pledge, okay? If you do all those three things, you're a member in, you're a voting member of UUCF. And so if you, and I have a feeling pretty much everyone here probably is a voting member of UUCF, then you are eligible to be a delegate. The the LNC will give priority to UUC, in terms of being delegates, to UUCF leadership such as board members, lay ministers, members of committees, in that order. Will also, if appropriate or if needed, give priority to really creating a diverse congregational representative group. Now that includes youth. You heard me talk about, in my own example, my youngest went to 2 GAs with me. It is possible because with our rules as a congregation, you can join this, you can be a member as early as 16 years old. So if you want, if you're a high school youth and you want to become a member so you can vote as a delegate at General Assembly, that's fine. In fact, that's been done before. All right. So that we will, we, the LNC, will look to give priority just to make sure that we have a diverse delegation of congregants. No more than one member of a family may be a UUCF delegate. And if your husband or wife really wants to go, they could be an alternate if to be named to that. And there's really 4 expectations. If you're a delegate, there's 4 expectations of you. First is you show up at General Assembly and you actually participate in the sessions and you vote. Now, before anyone asks, and it's kind of been alluded to earlier or said, UUCF has no requirement that delegates to General Assembly vote a certain way. The second is that you attend an orientation which the LNC will sponsor for all the delegates later in the spring. Third is there's an online orientation that's provided by the UUA board online. We just ask all the delegates watch that. And fourth is that you bring back your experience and you share it with others. And the LNC will most likely, I think over the summer, if not the early fall, probably facilitate that by putting together a meeting of the delegates, other people who are interested, to share their experiences and communicate what they learned and other comments. Okay. So if you want to be a delegate, how do you do that? You apply online on our website. I've got the link available. The link is also in the weekly bulletin. That's probably the easiest way to get to it. You'll fill out a form which just asks you about your membership and your background. It's pretty straightforward. Notification of the delegate selection, we'll make that as soon as practicable. Essentially, we've asked everyone to sign up by the end of March so that we can then get the slate together of delegates, if we have to name alternates, et cetera, move that to the coordinating team for the official blessing. And then after that, there's just some administration that the LNC will do with the UUA so that delegates get their credentials and they can register as such. Okay? And as I mentioned, we'll maintain a list of alternates if we have more than 12 people apply to be delegates. And obviously, as an alternate, you'd be on standby to be a full-fledged delegate if one of our delegates has to drop out. Okay? So I'm going to stop there. I know it's a lot of information, but I was, again, trying to be efficient. If you have any questions, you're welcome to reach out to me. Welcome to reach out to any member of the Leadership and Nominating Committee. And I'll stop there and say if you have maybe any general questions very briefly, but otherwise I'll hang around a little bit afterwards. Right? Thanks. Oh, yes, Ruth. Yes, Ruth. Oh, yeah. Yeah, thanks. Ruth just mentioned, and thanks to Ruth, actually, let me give her a shout out because there's now a trifold out there, beautiful one, which has all the information that I just went over about General Assembly, plus this great little QR code, which has the access to all those links I talked about. Thank you, Ruth. And the LNC members will be manning that for the next couple of Sundays. Okay? Thanks all.
So today's program was a listening session, and it was to hear the different perspectives. And I know there were several statements that others didn't agree with, wanted to comment on, that sort of thing. But this really was a listening session, not a debate. We might do that later. We'll have to decide. It was to raise your awareness of the issues being discussed, and I encourage you, like Craig has said, to do your own research and fact-finding as you make your own decisions on whether you support the proposals or not. So we will be looking at other opportunities to discuss Article 2, and we are open to other suggestions. If you have any, I'm hearing that there's an interest in doing other programs similar to this. But so just let us know what you think would work, and we'll see what we can do. Mainly, I want to thank all of you for coming and for your interest in this important topic. And a special thank you to our panelists and all the others who played a role in helping with today's program.